Okay.
Hello.
Hi. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much for having me, Ted. This is really awesome. I'm really excited to be here again. I spoke at the Nanaimo Hempology Convention last year. It was really awesome. So I'm really stoked to be back here again. And yeah, as Ted said, I'm the owner of the Vancouver Seed Bank and also the Victoria Seed Bank here on the island. And I have been involved in activism for 10 years. When you said that, that's actually true. I did the math, and that's crazy. I started out, though, weirdly, like when I first moved to Vancouver, I had absolutely no interest in cannabis or really in drug use whatsoever. I'm from a really small town called Thunder Bay, Ontario. And, yes. And there's very little marijuana there, surprisingly, like very little. Everybody's big into alcohol and really big into cocaine. That's really all you see. So I wasn't really exposed to marijuana like at all. Some friends of mine, we got together and I think we got some shake off of like my friend's mom's boyfriend or something, and we made cookies one time because that's all, I really just wanted to try marijuana and cookies. I was worried about smoking it. And we had a really good time at like 16. We just ate some cookies, tried playing cards unsuccessfully, and just kind of fell asleep early that night after a sauna, and it was really awesome. But we never really were exposed to weed, and I really knew nothing about it except all the things that I was told in health class that turned out to be wrong, like marijuana, one joint is like 5 cigarettes and it's bad for you and it'll lead to heroin abuse and stuff. So I was really intimidated by drugs and I didn't want to really have anything to do with it. When I moved up to Vancouver, I was actually interested in film and theater, and I went to Capilano College for filmmaking basically. And it was sort of weird, like I was in a relationship, I was working at Starbucks and everything was cool. And then my boyfriend said to me one day, like, I have a problem with speed. And I didn't know what that meant because I was from Thunder Bay, and I thought he meant like Dexatrin or diet pills or something. And he worked a lot. He was a DJ at night. He worked a lot, and I didn't really know how he managed to keep up with that schedule. And then I figured it out because he basically had to tell me that he smoked crystal meth on almost a regular basis, and that totally shocked me. I had no idea what that was. I watched Queer as Folk, so I knew like what crystal meth was in some degree and like how people used it, but I had never been exposed to anything like that before. And I basically lived with him for a year like that. He had a meth addiction, he would smoke meth, he would take telephones apart and just do crazy random things that I had never ever seen before. And he really, really wanted to stop. But nobody, this was 2000, like 2001, nobody had any clue about crystal meth. Like doctors don't know about it, addiction counselors have no idea, they're just, everybody's clueless about it. So he basically had nowhere to go, nobody talked to about it, his family was completely stigmatized by it. So there was just like zero communication for him. And he had no outlet, like nothing to do. He had tried rehab, didn't work. So I started researching like alternative rehab options. And the only thing that I could find was the Ibogaine clinic, and that was actually something in Vancouver that at the time Mark Emery had actually been paying for completely. Like it was a free clinic that people could go to and take Ibogaine, and it actually had an extremely high success rate compared to these other really 12-step program, AA-based other addiction therapies that were not working for people. So I tried contacting the Ibogaine clinic, but it just didn't work out because my boyfriend ended up killing himself instead because he just couldn't deal with it anymore. So for me, like that had huge ramifications in my life. I pretty much gave up everything. Like I lost all interest in theater and acting because it seemed really stupid and shallow. And I also started to have like a really hard problem eating. Like I was super nauseous all the time. I remember like the next day I woke up and I was just super, super nauseous. Like I could not eat. And suddenly, like marijuana went from being something that was just a recreational sort of funny thing to something that was actually really beneficial to me. Like I remember my sister sat me down, rolled a joint for me, and I watched the Golden Girls, and I actually like ate a meal for the first time in like 2 weeks since my boyfriend had died. So it was significant for me because like I actually was eating again and I'm feeling better. And so I started to realize that not only was the drug war really harming people, like my boyfriend, who was just absolutely stigmatized because of his addiction. He wasn't a bad person, he was just doing something that nobody fucking understood. So people were scared and they didn't know what to do, and everybody just abandoned him, because that's what you do when people are addicted to something. Like, if they don't immediately get over it, then everybody just leaves, and those are your options. So for me, I just felt like there's got to be a better way, because when we prohibit something, it doesn't stop us from doing it. It just makes everybody really, really stigmatized and really ignorant about it. So there's just got to be a better way, like whether it's crystal meth, whether it's heroin, whether it's marijuana. We have to educate ourselves seriously about it and start looking at stuff from a place of education and reality and not from fear. So I kind of just like started meandering. I mean, I started working in a box factory after that. It was called the Great Little Box Company, and I was a shipping administrator for about a year, and I learned a lot about shipping and shipping stuff. And after that, I just did a lot of random jobs. I was a blackjack dealer for a little while, and then I started teaching ESL because my sister connected me with a guy, and I had a lot of Korean students are in Vancouver, and I have good conversational English skills. So I just started like teaching conversational English for a while. And I would take all of the Korean students who were basically my age, and we'd walk around downtown Vancouver, and I started taking them into Mark Emery's store, BCMP at the time, and just touring them around, because Korea, they're even worse than Thunder Bay. Like they didn't know anything about marijuana, and they were really curious about it. So we would just take all the students, and I would take them on little pop block tours. And one time on one tour, the guys behind the counter at Mark Emery's place mentioned to me that they were looking for somebody to do shipping in the shipping department. And I was like, I know how to do shipping, like a box factory. So I dropped off my resume like multiple times at the BCMP, saying like, hey, I know all about shipping, like just give me the shipping job. And eventually they did. They hired me for shipping, and I did a lot of shipping vaporizers, shipping bubble bags to all over the world. And I eventually got hired at Cannabis Culture magazine for shipping and distribution of Cannabis Culture magazine. And then everything kind of went crazy that summer when Mark got arrested. Mark and Greg and Michelle, they all got arrested one day by the DEA, and pretty much everything changed at that point. Mark's company really had to downsize, and I decided that I could take some more risks and I could do some more stuff that would really put myself out there a little bit more. So me and Dana Larson, decided that we should really pick up where Mark was forced to leave off. We should really just continue overgrowing the government, because that's really the most important thing. So we started the Vancouver Seed Bank. And at the time, like this was about 7 years ago, at the time Vancouver was not that friendly to the seeds anymore. People were really freaked out by the DEA thing and being shut down. Kind Seed Company continued to operate like right across the street from Mark, which was kind of a slap in the face. It really showed everybody that this was a political thing. It wasn't about Canadian law or Canadian crimes. This was about Mark and punishing Mark. So we decided we're going to open our own seed store, and we're going to put all the money back into the political movement the way that Mark did. And that's what we did. I mean, despite everybody telling us like you should really be cautious, there's obviously like you're marked because you're going to be doing this. But we decided to do it anyway. And it was important also because the urban movement in terms of like farming and being self-sustainable has also begun to grow in the last 10 years or so. So it's not just about cannabis anymore, it's about all of the useful plants and medicinal plants of the world, especially like poppies, tobacco, pretty much everything that you could possibly think of that has a use or that's edible in some way. We definitely sell at the store, because at this point, all of the plants of the world are under threat. It's not just cannabis. So we're really trying to educate and keep all of those species available to people and around. And that's really what the seed bank is all about. It's not just about keeping the seeds for ourselves, but about making them available to everybody. And a lot of people in Canada don't realize that cannabis seeds are illegal. And I have to like kind of explain it at least once a day to people that no, cannabis seeds are not legal. I'm not allowed to technically sell these to you. You're not technically allowed to carry them with you. When I sell seeds to people, it's considered conspiracy to grow. When you carry seeds, you're conspiring to grow as well. And that's not allowed. Even if you have your federal exemption from Health Canada to grow, you're technically still not allowed to buy seeds from me. you're only allowed to buy seeds from Health Canada, which I think is really bad. And also, the hemp industry is the same way. You can't grow hemp in Canada unless you have the agricultural license to do that. And although we sell industrial hemp, you're technically not allowed to grow it or sell it unless you have a license to do that. And that's really wrong. Like, it shouldn't be that way in Canada. And in the UK, the hemp seeds, cannabis seeds are legal. They are allowed to use hemp seed. They are allowed to possess cannabis seeds because in the UK, they actually recognize the hemp plant as one of the most vital plants in like the world. It's one of the most vital food sources in the world, not only for people, but also for animals. It's a very popular plant feed, or sorry, bird feed and animal feed. So in the UK, they recognize the importance of hemp, but for some reason in Canada and all of North America, it's completely illegal and we're not allowed to even touch the seeds for it. So I was really surprised to hear all this, and the city of Vancouver was not that friendly to the store when we first opened. They hassled us, they wouldn't give us a business license because cannabis seeds are illegal. Kind of had to do a lot of jumping through hoops just to get a bank account initially. So it's not that easy, and it's definitely frustrating because a lot of people in Canada just don't know the state of the laws right now. And we do try to carry international strains, international genetics, but they're getting harder and harder to get. Strains that come from Europe, strains that come from Spain, like they're really hard to get into Canada these days. We have to use really clandestine methods to import that kind of stuff. And then sometimes it doesn't work that well because the climates are different. But anyway, we really do strive to keep all of the strains that are humanly possible to get available to everybody, because that's really fundamentally what Mark was trying to do as well. And I can safely say that over the past 7 years, we have sold a whole lot of seeds, and we are definitely overgrowing the government in a big way. Even though like it's not Mark technically doing it anymore, it's definitely 100% inspired by Mark and really just continuing on the legacy that he started, because we're using a lot of the same seed breeders that Mark established 10 or 15 years ago with the same strains that are still there today and still can be purchased today. So I'm really proud of that, and it does make me really happy inside to know that I'm helping people grow medicine around the world that will benefit people. So that's a good thing. But it's still really frustrating because I feel like in Canada we're definitely moving backwards in the last 5 to 7 years. It seems like anyway that all of our policies are going the wrong way. And I feel like there's a lot of apathy amongst the Canadian people because our voices are definitely not being heard at this point. So if you do want to grow and you do want to rebel a little bit, now is the time to do it. If you want to start growing seeds outdoors, now is the time, because the planting season is upon us. And in Vancouver and in Victoria especially, growing outdoors is actually really awesome. We're spoiled here because on the West Coast, we can start really early compared to the rest of Canada. Like in Thunder Bay, there's still snow right now. So we're super spoiled. And anybody who has a little plot that's off in the distance somewhere that you think would be a good spot to grow, definitely come by either of the stores because there are a ton of different seeds to choose from. When we talk about seeds in particular, I always use the analogy of dog breeding because it's kind of similar. When you're breeding seeds for your own purpose, you want to pick a plant that's for your characteristics, in the same way that you want to like pick a pet that's for your characteristics. So for outdoors in particular, people want to go with strains that are bred here, bred to finish early outside, and have the characteristics medicinally that they're looking for. So if you're growing outdoors, let's say here, generally people want a strain that's going to finish around like mid-September, late September at the latest. If you're growing like in Ontario where it gets really cold, I would go with like a late August finisher outside. And that's the nice thing about my store, is that we can pick a strain based on your needs and based on what you want, and then it's going to really turn out good. I mean, you could totally like plant some bag seed that you get. If you find a couple seeds in with your weed, plant it, because you could very well get some nice plants out of it. But you're not exactly sure what you're getting, and especially outdoors, it's a bit of a gamble, because if that seed doesn't have the right finishing time, you're gonna have a really nice bud, but then it's gonna start to rot because it's not gonna finish as quickly as it should have. So it's really important to pick a strain that's for your characteristics. And right now, particularly, there's a lot of really good Canadian seed breeders who are doing strains that are going to be awesome outdoors this time of year. Like Kootenai Mountain Seed Company has been around for like 15 years. They breed 3 strains, Nepali Grizzly, Jumbo Grizzly, White Grizzly. And each one has a slightly different finishing time. The Nepali is the best of the 3. It finishes at a late August, early September finish. And then there's the White Grizzly, that's like a mid-September finish, and it's a little bit taller. And if you dare, you can go with a Jumbo Grizzly. It finishes late September outside. So you have a lot of different varieties to choose from. Those ones are all indica dominant though. Those ones are going to give you that couch lock, body stone kind of an effect. Definitely high in the THC and the CBD content. So you're going to have a little bit more of a sleepy body stone kind of an effect from those indica dominant strains. But those ones technically tend to be the better for outdoors and like the colder climates, because indicas, they're from the mountainous, colder regions of the world. So they're used to a little bit of abuse and crappiness outside. And there's some hybrids though too, like if you wanted to do a sativa, if you like that more creative, euphoric, energizing kind of a high, you want that kind of like espresso, clean your house kind of feeling, there are some sativa crosses, like there's sativa strains that are crossed into some indica to give them a little bit of a faster finishing time, a little bit bulkier, but still have that nice euphoric sativa high that you might be looking for. There's a company called Great White North. They breed from Manitoba actually, so they're really, really good hardy outdoor strains. They do 2 strains that are excellent sativa crosses, early sativa and another one called Manitoba Poison. Manitoba Poison is a South African Durban sativa cross, so that one's really nice. It goes crazy purple colors, very skinny leaves, and it'll still finish early to mid-September outside. So you have that option too. There's lots of different varieties to choose from. And the nice thing about the seed bank is that they're all available all in one place. And you can try 1 or 2 different ones. Some people like to have like more of their daytime smoke, the sativa, and then they go with like the indica for their evening smoke. So you have a nice like variety of all things. So yeah, this is the time of year, and you do have a huge variety, a lot of options to choose from. Oh, and there's ruderalis too, actually. The ruderalis varieties are really interesting, and some people are a little bit scared of these, but they do have their place and their time. Ruderalis is a type of cannabis that comes from the Eastern European section of the world, and they're unique in that they're not phototropic like most marijuana plants. Most marijuana plants will wait for the light cycles to change, that summer equinox happens, and that triggers them to start flowering. But with ruderalis varieties, they don't wait for that light cycle change. So they're special in that they're just going to flower when they're ready in terms of size. Some people say actually their root base is what triggers their flowering. So those ones are neat because it is kind of a hassle to worry about the light cycles. And sometimes, like if you're from a really cold climate, the season's just not that good, and you're not going to have enough time for the plant to finish flowering properly. So the ruderalis crosses are actually really ideal for people. There's a strain called Early Wonder Skunk. It's a ruderalis, Thai, Afghani, and Guatemalan. So it's only 25% ruderalis, but that's enough for it to be auto-flowering. And so you can just stick it outside anytime, and it basically will finish in about 90 days from the day that you plant it. And so that's really convenient, especially if you're growing outdoors in a balcony situation, in a city, or in a more urban environment where you're going to get ambient light from like buildings and street lights, or maybe even from your own house. If you're going to have ambient light around, it's really better to go with a ruderalis variety because they won't get confused by the light cycles like a regular marijuana plant would. So they're a little bit easier to grow in a more kind of urban area. And those have been really popular too. The Early Wonder Skunk's nice because it's a bit taller. Since it's only 25% ruderalis, it's going to get like 3 to 4 feet and nice yields and really frosty. And the lowrider is the other option, and it's a very small plant. It's like main dominant, football-shaped kind of plants, really small. And that's convenient though, because you can grow it amongst your like tomato plants and your other vegetables, and it just sort of blends in nice and green amongst your other things. And you can make really nice bubble hash out of that at the end of the day. The catch with the ruderalis varieties though is that you wouldn't be able to clone from them because you can't trick them into thinking it's springtime with the veg light cycle over and over again. They're just going to flower eventually because they don't care about the light that much. So that's the catch with them. They're sort of a one-off, but you can definitely grow from seed every year with those ones and not have to worry about them not finishing on time because they're super fast, 3-month finishers, done. So those have been really popular in Canada because we have the really short season here. They're also really popular in hot places because you can just do perpetual harvest all year round. So anywhere in Mexico or Spain or Africa, you could definitely just do perpetual harvests of these and harvest all year round. And an interesting thing too, like in warmer climates, like places like Jamaica, the plants all kind of seem to be auto-flowering because they don't wait for springtime to plant there. They just wait for the season to be right and for the water to be there. So they're planting in the fall, they're planting in the middle of winter, they're planting at the beginning of summer. They'll just plant whenever, and as long as the season is good and the rain comes, it doesn't really matter. So a lot of plants have sort of become auto-flowering because of where they are, and some plants have been bred to be auto-flowering because they have ruderalis crossed into them. So there's all kinds of different genetics out there for people to choose from, that's for sure. But the indica dominant varieties are the more popular varieties because they're commercially more viable. Indica dominant strains are squatter growing, they're going to be easier to grow in an indoor space, and they're denser, they tend to have better bud density, and they're faster finishing. Indica dominant strains tend to be about 7 to 8 weeks flowering time. Sativa dominant strains can go quite a bit longer, like 12 to 16 weeks even flowering time. So sativa dominant strains, although a lot of people enjoy that euphoric, energizing high that they typically have, they're really like a pain to grow to some degree because they're so tall, they're a little bit gangly, they're a little bit testy, they don't like a lot of abuse, and they take literally 4 months just to flower sometimes. So they're not that convenient for commercial purposes, but for personal use and for personal growers, people really tend to love the sativa varieties for themselves. Dr. Atomic is one of our most popular indoor breeders, and he works with 2 strains that are sativa dominant that are probably our top selling strains for sativas. One is a Super Silver Haze crossed with Northern Lights called Atomic Haze. It's mostly Super Silver Haze, like 75% Super Silver Haze, and then 25% Northern Lights just to bulk it up and make it a little bit faster flowering than a pure Super Silver Haze would be. And that one's been very popular for indoor growing. It's got a low smell. It smells like when you grind up fresh carrots. It's typically what sativas tend to smell like a fresh vegetable, carroty kind of smell. So that's a really, really nice strain, but it's definitely going to be on that sativa end. So if you ever get like anxiety and stuff, you might want to stay away from the sativas. So for people who are growing for medical purposes in particular, a lot of people are choosing to grow their own medicine these days, and that is great. And a lot of people grow for someone else, and that's also really, really beneficial. And there's a lot of dispensaries popping up around in Victoria and also in Vancouver. But it's sort of important to note that these are all operating completely outside the law in the same way the Vancouver Seed Bank does. We're technically not allowed to sell seeds at all, but we do it just because it's a terrible law. And the dispensaries are operating completely outside the law as well as nonprofits in Vancouver. So we do operate in sort of the same way in that we're always recommending strains for people for particular medical needs. And it's just like, it's not quite as instant of an effect in terms of if we know they were successful or not. But a lot of people do really enjoy being able to pick a specific strain, come in and ask for something specifically and know exactly what they're getting. So it's really an important part of growing, that's for sure. Does anybody have any questions or anything that's far about growing or any of that jazz? No? All right. Yeah, what's up?
You were saying you ship worldwide?
We do. We ship worldwide.
Even to the dreaded U.S.?
Yeah.
Isn't that what got Mark in trouble?
Yeah, it is. And actually, we operated for 2 or 3 years not shipping to the U.S. We shipped worldwide, but not to the U.S. And it was like a little bit of a back and forth, but we did eventually decide to ship to the U.S. Mostly because we saw so many other companies doing it and making money off of doing it and not putting that money back into the movement again. So we decided to step it up. We use a really, really discreet shipping method, but we do ship to the United States now with great success. And it's sort of ironic because Americans are in the same boat as Canadians in that they don't know that cannabis seeds are illegal. Especially now with Washington and Colorado legalizing, there's a lot of confusion about what the state of Canada's laws are. And, oh, well, what do you mean you can't ship me seeds? I live in Washington. But yeah, your federal law still says it's illegal. Canada's federal law still says it's illegal. So shipping over international borders is definitely illegal. And Mark's charge was specifically because of the cannabis seeds. And they considered that a violation of a treaty that we had with the U.S. that said if anybody ships over any dangerous goods, they can be extradited out of Canada. and they considered the cannabis seeds that Mark was shipping dangerous goods, so it fell under that treaty with the U.S. So yeah, like that's definitely a risk, and that's definitely something that I worry about every day. But it's still not something that I'm not going to stop doing it just because of a concern that they might come and extradite me to. Although it's definitely something that could happen. It goes to show, because Mark specifically was charged and none of the other Canadian retailers in Canada were charged with seeds or seed selling, it does go to show that Mark's prosecution was definitely politically based. And it's really annoying to me, that's for sure. What's up, Ted?
Well, I'm wondering along that lines, you know, since 2005, how many companies have been hassled by the police for selling? I believe there's one left in Montreal.
There was the Quebec people, the Heaven's Stairway.
Okay.
They were busted, but they also had, like, there was pounds of gold there was cocaine, there was guns involved. So there was a lot of other stuff happening with the Heaven's Stairway seed business that was definitely way more than what Mark was doing. But that's really the only other time that, like, a seed type of business was busted. And it's only ever been Mark that's been charged before that, as far as I know. Mark was charged 2 or 3 times in
Ian Hunter got charged first.
with seeds as well. And then Mark was charged. So we've had like people charged with seeds, and then but this was by the Canadian government that they were charged, and they were fined. And then when Mark gets charged by the American government, rather than getting fined, he gets threatened with potentially life in prison. So it's a completely different thing when a Canadian citizen gets charged under Canadian law and when a Canadian citizen gets charged under American law. So, and it's just ridiculous for a Canadian to get charged for something that he did in Canada under American law. So there's a lot of confusion about whether Mark is American. I always try to tell people, like, no, Mark's not American. He was born in London, Ontario. All of his crimes were committed in Canada. So it's just a really frustrating situation because it's very confusing, and a lot of people don't know exactly the story of what happened with Mark and how and what his crimes specifically were. A lot of people think it was actually marijuana that was being sent over the border, because in the media reports that's a lot of what gets said. So it was just seeds, and I'm really sure that, like, with Heaven's Stairway, there was a lot of other stuff going on there too. And even then, their charges would not have been as high as what Mark got from the Americans. So.
There was a group called the Unitarian Service Committee. They do seed saving. And are any groups like that involved in seed saving for hemp plants or marijuana plants? Because I'm into natural healing, and back in '91, I think it became illegal to even grow a comfrey plant. And there I am standing in my yard looking at all this comfrey, and I thought, well, you know, and it grew wild. Even in Illinois, hemp plants grow wild along the railroad tracks. You know, so I'm wondering, is the natural healing or seed saving groups, are they getting involved in this as well?
They're not getting involved with the cannabis seeds because they're so prohibited. They would probably not keep the cannabis seeds is the problem. Like for seeds like lavender and comfrey and chamomile and other plants that have medical value that the Vancouver Seed Bank also carries, by the way. Those ones are not prohibited to possess, as far as I know. But cannabis seeds, you're prohibited to possess those unless you have a federal license from Health Canada and you bought the strain from Health Canada. Those seeds would be legal. But other than that, since you're not allowed to legally possess cannabis seeds, I don't think that any other seed saving organization in North America is saving cannabis seeds, just because they would be charged with possession if they were caught with them. So I would say really that my store, the Vancouver Seed Bank, is one of the only places that is sort of preserving specific genetics with specific medical attributes, because nobody else will do it. It's like a hot potato kind of a thing. Nobody else wants to touch them, except for Amsterdam and Spain and the UK, where they're sort of pseudo-legal there as well. So.
It's even illegal to save the seeds, like you buy the package of seeds from a store like Walmart, and I was looking at the package, and they have it written, or had it written, that it was even illegal to, you know, grow the tomato plant and save the seeds for the next year, so.
Yeah, that's bad.
That means they're GMO.
Yeah.
Well, they're not
so-
necessarily GMO because like, to be genetically modified doesn't necessarily mean that they're not gonna produce the seed the next year. Like that's Terminator seeds and GMOs. Terminator seeds are GMO, but not all GMO seeds are Terminator seeds. So, like that's just wrong. Everybody should be able to keep their own seed. It's a fundamental human right. But that's also a patent thing. Like the seeds are patented, and you're not allowed to keep them because it's like recording a football game or something. Like you're keeping somebody else's property at that point, and that is also like fundamentally wrong because the plants and seeds of the earth were put here long before the patent laws were put here. So obviously, like we're going to need these fundamental food life sources in the future, and it's really short-sighted to tell people like not to save seeds and just come back and buy them again next year. So it's another reason why we are definitely here.
That's Monsanto.
Yeah, Monsanto
Like that.
keeps like they own about 80% of
Yeah.
all the seed sources at this point are owned by Monsanto. So you have to go back and make sure that the company that you're buying from isn't sourcing their seeds from a Monsanto source. There's only about 20% of the seeds in the world right now that are not genetically modified or through Monsanto, so it's a really, really scary statistic.
Do you know approximately how many storefronts for seedbanks, or I guess the other category would be online distributors in Canada?
Online distributors of like cannabis seeds?
Sure.
Online distributors based in Canada, well there's my two, and then maybe 2 to 3 others. The rest of them are all based in Europe or in the United States. Like in the UK, you'll see a lot of seed banks online based in the UK because it's legal there. It's legal for them to export them, and it's legal for them to possess them there. But it's a different environment, and you won't see any retail stores, seed stores in Canada, except the head shops are legal, but the seed things are not legal. So I'm sure that like when a head shop goes to the city council and says like, oh, we need a business license for selling these hemp products, I'm sure they don't mention that they're also going to be selling cannabis seeds, because that would mean not getting a business license. So.
Although, how did the store in Windsor do? Wasn't it Windsor that recently there's a store opened up selling
there's like
seeds?
there's a couple. Is it just selling seeds?
No, but that was what hit the media.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was closed down, I think.
Did it get closed down?
Yeah, they got busted. Wasn't the one that got busted?
No.
No?
There's a lot popping up
There
in
was one
southern
that was got
Ontario.
busted not too long ago from Windsor too.
Yeah, like it's really unfair because in Vancouver we have the VPD who just choose to look the other way. And if you're anywhere else in Canada, like if you're in Calgary, or if I've really thought about opening one up in Thunder Bay, but I'm sure that we would just get busted immediately because it's RCMP territory there, and they really just apparently have nothing better to do. So, yeah, it's just that because we're in a big town with a lot of other stuff happening, that the Vancouver Seed Bank can stay open, while other places across Canada would probably get shut down. It's not fair, but that's how it is. So.
Can you,
Go ahead, I'm already
can you elaborate on shuffling money back into activism? How much and what
Yeah,
you're
well,
investing in?
a lot. We try to do anything as much as possible, whether it's sponsoring stuff like Sensible BC, putting money back into the 420 event, or the July 1st event, and all of just the other upcoming like activist things that you could possibly imagine. We give a lot of money to people just to travel to one place to another. A lot of money goes back into the Mark Emery campaign and just funding Jody to travel places. Anything that you can think of, like the Toronto GMM, we send them money every year. Anytime a store gets busted anywhere else, I'll send them money just because I feel bad. So just like anything humanly possible, I try to think of like whatever Mark did, whatever things that Mark would give money to. If we have the extra funds, then that's what we're giving the money to. Although technically, like, we're not a non-profit society, we're technically an incorporated company. I definitely operate as if it's non-profit because all the money just goes back into like-minded causes, that's for sure.
Back in the late 70s, could have been the, 80, 81, there was a news George Faulkner that exposed that Walmart was selling birdseed that contained hemp seed in it.
No.
And I ended up meeting his wife many years later. But, so is Walmart still selling birdseed that contains hemp seed in it?
Probably, like, probably, but the thing is, it's gonna be irradiated.
No.
So like, yeah, you can still
That's-
buy like hemp seed in its shell at like a organic grocery store bulk section, but it's probably gonna be irradiated, so they're not viable anymore. Yeah, that's the only way that they're actually allowed in the commercial market, is if they're no longer viable. Although once in a while they sprout up, so it's worth germinating.
Yeah.
All right, well.
Well, thanks again.